The metal bounce back was a downed plane. It was an aircraft, transport craft. The skies used to be full of these things. You know, there's all these aircraft that fly here and fly there. And back when we still had time, before everything got copywritten, they used to report these plane crashes. You know, they used to, you know, there'd be passengers, right? And there'd be like 200 dead or 300 dead. Or if there was, you know, eventually, you know, they had smaller passenger planes, but they stopped reporting the smaller passenger planes. You know, it was always, eventually you never heard about the 2-seater or the 3-seater or the 10 people that got killed. You only ever heard about the, you know, 200s and 300s. And people thought maybe the 2-seaters weren't crashing anymore because they didn't hear about it, so I guess it wasn't happening. Well, of course it was happening. And then there was the supply planes. Everyone has concerns about passenger craft because, well, again, it all came down to profit. It came down to money. If a passenger plane goes down and 300 people are killed, very high odds that somebody's going to sue you. They use the legal weaponry to take out your business. But if it's a transport craft, it's just supplies on board. You stand the risk of losing some things in transit. During the time of the crisis and during the war, they stopped even reporting transport craft falling out of the sky. And the government being so involved, they stopped looking at the maintenance and everything that was done on transport craft. They paid attention to the passenger, but a lot of the transport pilots, they were flying just things held together by a shoestring. It was just unbelievable how they just flew these hunks of junk. It was cheaper to get used planes, fly them until they died, rather than to, you know, try to maintain them because parts were expensive. I mean, simple maintenance you could do, but not major overhauls. It makes sense in a twisted kind of way if you think about it. So, during the time of the wars, with all the rioting and everything that was happening, no one wanted to transport anything by truck, and if you couldn't afford to put anything on trains, well, you flew it there. And these planes were falling out of the sky. Lost a lot of them. And when you're out here in the wastelands, you can still find them, and that's what this one was. This was some kind of a transport craft. I got over there. It's about the size of it looked like an old Hercules aircraft. They used to use them as army planes. Pretty big, I suppose. I mean, it thundered in pretty hard. One of the wings was completely gone. The other one was sort of sticking up like a strange fish that had turned on its side and stuck this wing out over the desert, giving like a shelf, like this rock outcropping kind of thing. It was all swept with sand. Half the wing had cracked off, so it created kind of a ledge. But it was high enough off the ground that you could sit under it, and one of the doors was exposed, so I waited for about half an hour looking for signs of life. The recon scan on the helmet showed me there was nothing alive in there whatsoever. There's no power source. This had been out here a long time. So very carefully I closed the gap and got in there. Sitting in the cockpit was, I called him Frank. Frank was the pilot. He was beach bone white. Absolutely desiccated. It was funny, actually. It was like something out of a movie, you know. There was absolutely no flesh left on this person. Not desiccated, not dried or nothing. It was like somebody had taken a Hollywood skeleton and put it in the the pilot seat. Like a medical skeleton almost. Even his helmet was still on. With most of the animals. So by seeing that, of course, you can pretty much tell that this had gone down after we lost the ozone, because the insects were the things that cleaned them out. And the insects will strip away every single part of, anything fleshy that can be taken by the insects was. So they took all his hair, they took everything. One of his arms had fallen off, but it was held together by his flight suit. There was other chairs lit around the back, storage chairs, so I dragged one out of the wreckage. There's nothing useful inside. I mean, everything in there was just dried up. I think he was flying electronic parts at one time or another, but there was no batteries. There was nothing there. I kicked open a few crates, but I was too tired. So I came outside and set one of the flight chairs up underneath the wing. This thing became my very own little home for a few hours. The way I was able to keep running nonstop like that was thanks once again to the recon helmet. With the military's invention of, with the legalization of aggression drugs and things like that, the aggression drugs became more and more and more potent. They became really, really concentrated, so that all you had to do was put a drop of stuff on your skin, and I mean, if you put too much on, it would kill you. So when they built these recon helmets, they knew the guys would have to stay alive for a long time, so they actually, as part of the shooters, which is, I mentioned this before, but a shooter is a chemical enhancement that they do in case you run into nerve toxins or whatever. But they actually are able to put in these micro needles that will just administer like 0.003 of a milligram of these stay awake and aggression drugs, and it's enough to keep you going. And there's enough in this helmet to keep me awake and moving forwards for without sleep whatsoever. I mean, my body would probably give out on me, but there's enough for several thousand dosages, 10,000-20,000 dosages. So I mean, it's not like I'm going to run out. If I made a decision to keep running, this helmet would have kept dosing me. I figured this out as I sat underneath the wing, and I realized that I wasn't tired. I had to wait for the crash. I had to wait for it to wear off. So I took the helmet off because I was worried that maybe it might decide to just keep me awake. I gotten good at taking the helmet off. It's a bit of a trick to get the sucker off, but it did come off. So I took the helmet off, and that buzzing came back. And that's when I realized what it was that they had done to me, what it was to be a Dreadman. You see, being a Dreadman was... Well, everyone's afraid of them because they know that they can see electronics. They know that they can see what's going through the air, but it's hard to try to imagine, and it's even harder for me to try to describe to you what that's like. The only way I can do it is start by explaining to you that your eyes, I mean, no one explains how to see. How do you explain sight to a blind man? It doesn't happen. Your eyes, light comes down, hits an object, enters in through the lens of your eye, broadcasts a picture on the back of your eye. Those signals are then taken by the optic nerve into your brain, and your brain then takes these signals and transforms them into an image. Dreadman hardware, which is, well, experimental and probably one of the greatest achievements in a horrible way for all of mankind, was that it would interface with the optic nerve and add the ability, like a radio scanner, to pick up any kind of radio frequency and interpret it. Any kind of frequency, depending on the scanner that they put in. Some Dreadmen were only made to hear certain frequencies, or military Dreadmen, or whatever. But I'd gotten the good stuff. I had a good implant that did a pretty wide range of stuff. Being a librarian, I imagine that was Mr. Weaver's goal.